All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Today's episode, we'll probably actually be banned because of the subject matter that we're talking about. We're going to be talking about the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, the latest regarding COVID-19 and more on episode 321 of the In the Tank podcast. All right, that is right. Hello and welcome. Special welcome to all those that are watching us live on Facebook and YouTube. And, considering that like 95+% of our audience is audio only listeners, if you want to put a face to the voice, if you want to join the conversation, make sure to check out our live stream every Thursday, noon Central Time, 1 o'clock Eastern Time. If you want to join in the conversation, you can do so because the show is live. I don't think most people know that because I usually say that at the end of the episode. I'm trying to make a habit of saying it at the beginning for all of those people, like I said, who are audio only. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, I've got Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing just great. You should have mentioned the YouTube channel that we have for those just listening, and that's Heartland Tube, or you can just search Heartland Institute. I'm sure you'd come across it. But in our little opening montage video there with the little happy theme song is a picture of the so-called QAnon shaman who was sentenced this week to 3 additional years in prison, I think, or maybe 4 total years in prison.
Wait, our producer Andy has been sentenced for 3 years in prison? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's why he's not here. It's not because he has COVID. That's not why he's not here. He's not here because he was sentenced to 4 years in prison. But the judge actually sentenced him, blaming him for violence that happened. He made no violent acts. There's video of him talking to Capitol Hill police officers, and the officers telling him, just remain calm, don't yell, don't break anything. You're allowed to walk around. And he gets 4 years in jail, and he's been in solitary confinement for 10 months in prison in DC. So that is not what we're going to talk about on the podcast today, but we are going to talk about how our legal system right now is really kind of troubling.
Also joining us, Chris Talgo, senior editor at the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
Doing good. And just to piggyback a little bit off of Jim's opening statement. So yeah, the Chewbacca guy gets 41 months in prison for stepping inside the Senate chamber, but all the people who rioted and burned buildings and killed people during the peaceful protests of 2 summers ago, they got 0 days in prison. Real nice.
Yeah, well, that's we're going to talk about the justice system a little bit on this podcast. Like I said, we got the Rittenhouse trial, but before we get into that, I saw the newest James Bond movie this past weekend. It's about a month old, so it's this isn't the most timely of conversation, but I thought it was pretty good. The plot revolves around a government-funded virus that was co-opted and released into the world, potentially resulting in the deaths of millions of people.
Ripped from the headlines.
Oh, wait. I'm thinking of the Glenn Beck COVID-19 investigation special that was just released last night. Sorry, I get those things mixed up. We'll talk about that in the second half of the show. But no, that's actually very close to what the plot of the new James Bond movie is. And Jim, I haven't talked to you about this at all. And sorry, audience, that we're not getting right to the topics, but whatever. This is just a casual show, I wanted to talk to you about this, but I wanted to make sure that I talked to you about this while we were recording for this episode. So,
all right.
You are always concerned about the wokeness in Hollywood, and I think most of us are. But I think you even referred to like double woke 7 instead of 007 and all this, and I don't blame you because there's a lot of conservative blog pieces out there and commentators talking about the impending doom and wokeness of the upcoming James Bond movie. Can I reassure you that there is basically zero wokeness, at least overt wokeness, in the new James Bond movie? So just calm your fears with that.
All
It's
right.
safe to turn it on. You can check it out and not be poisoned by SJW rhetoric or anything like that. But just wanted to get that
Well,
said on the record.
okay. Well, actually, the only thing we can be assured of is that this movie is going to lose a ton of money, because the news about this, besides the wokeness or the fears of wokeness, was that the budget, that the movie's production went way over budget. They were about to release it when COVID hit, and they kept moving it back and moving it back. Are we going to stream it? Are we going to release it in theaters? And the longer the movie sat around, the more money they were losing.
That's
and
true.
They actually tried to sell the movie to another studio, and they were not interested in it. So, if the movie's any good, considering it's turned into a bit of a white elephant for the studio, I think it's Paramount that produces it. Good for them. But I've really been the first
$700 million worldwide it made.
Okay.
So I think it turned a profit.
Well, no, I think that's how much they needed just to break even, I believe, on it, actually, to be honest, because they spent a lot of marketing money that went down the tubes because COVID happened and nobody went to theaters. And so they had to start it all over again. But look, James Bond, the first Daniel Craig James Bond, Casino Royale, is one of the best James Bond movies ever. I think it's the best. I can rewatch that movie anytime, but each subsequent James Bond movie after that just started getting worse and worse. And I used to like the James Bond franchise pretty much. I have no interest in it anymore, so I'm not even going to watch it.
Well, I've been a big James Bond fan since I was a kid, and I like the Daniel Craig era. I think Skyfall was actually pretty darn good, so I don't think it was completely a downhill trajectory, but I really enjoyed this last one, except for one major component of it, but I'll avoid spoilers. Anyone in the chats that's listening to this, have you seen it? What did you think? Am I overlooking some of the wokeness? I want to see your comments, or concerns or anything like that, but one thing that we'll also mention right up front of this podcast is you might see me refreshing my phone here on the left, or maybe Jim is looking at his computer, because obviously the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict has still not been released. So I suspected even yesterday that it's going to be during this episode, while we're talking about it, that the verdict is going to come in. So we're all kind of keeping an eye on our respective devices here, so that we know when it comes down. But
that would be an improvement, because so often great big news breaks after we've done the podcast. Like that's 3:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday or a Friday or something like that.
Well, that's also probably what will end up happening.
Sure.
So on to our topics. I guess we can get right into it. Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And I'm always kind of weary of how to kind of go about approach topics like this. Not necessarily because it's controversial or anything, but it's just like, where do we start? I assume most people listening to this know the context of it, but maybe some don't. So I don't know. I'm going to leave it to you, Jim. Do you want to kind of give us the elevator pitch to bring us up to speed where we are right now, starting with wherever you think is appropriate? I'm going to leave it to you.
Well, I think we'll get into the details of what exactly happened, and it's actually been really interesting. The Young Turks, for instance, has a very popular channel on YouTube. They, for months and months, had the basic facts about this situation with Kyle Rittenhouse incorrect. They thought he crossed state lines with a weapon. He did not. They thought his mother drove him to Wisconsin and dropped him off at a riot. That did not happen. They thought he shot people of color. He didn't do that. They thought he chased people and shot them like some kind of maniac. That is the opposite of what happened. And so, half of this country that doesn't that consumes CNN or MSNBC has the details of this trial completely backwards. I tweeted out the other day, and I believe the Twitter account of this very podcast gave it a like, which is nice. Thanks, Donnie. Appreciated that. But I said that if Kyle Rittenhouse is found guilty, that it would be a miscarriage of justice, and that the idea of self-defense is completely dead in this country. And I had a friend of mine who is not on the right, a longtime friend of mine, who just was not happy that I tweeted that. And I almost, I don't like to get into it with friends on social media. And I certainly don't want to talk about politics with friends, because I like having friends. But, I just didn't feel, it was obvious that he had not seen any details about this trial. He'd actually certainly could not have watched even 30 minutes of the prosecution's case against Kyle, which all it actually did was confirm that he was acting completely in justifiable self-defense. But, but from start to finish right now, this trial has been an abomination. and the level of prosecutorial misconduct has been off the charts. If this trial was taking place in Singapore or Malaysia or something like that, the UN Human Rights Commission would be convening a meeting right now and probably sending people to observe it. Because if Kyle Rittenhouse is found guilty, as I said, the concept of self-defense, defending yourself against grievous injury, is dead. And I think that's actually the point here. And I think that's the point. That's what the left certainly wants. I mean, if Kyle Rittenhouse can't shoot people that are literally trying to kill him, when the heck are you allowed to ever use force to protect yourself? We have a couple of clips here where the prosecutor, I think Andy's going to pull him up for us here. COVID Andy, we'll call him until he gets cleared. But here the prosecutor literally says that that everybody takes a beating sometimes, and that Kyle was somehow a coward because he used his legally possessed weapon to protect himself. Andy, do you have the ability to pull those clips up?
While he's pulling that up, I want to ask Chris, because I know, Jim, you've got like one of the live streams of a watch party of the trial on right behind you there. I've been watching that, probably not as consistently as you have, but it's a great channel for this type of stuff.
Ricada Law. They have about 100,000 people watching right now. They had 100,000 people watching, or almost 100,000 watching all day yesterday when nothing happened. People are just tuning in to listen to this commentary. Again,
but I want to ask Chris, how much of the actual trial have you been watching, or have you just mostly been watching like the coverage of the trial?
No, I've watched a lot of the court testimony, and I've watched a lot of summaries of each day what happened in the court. But I want to take one step back and just go back to the origin of all this. Jacob Blake was shot by the police because he was holding a knife, and they had to shoot him because he was a potential threat. The media lied through their teeth and never said a word about the knife, and they made it seem like he was a unarmed black man who was shot by the cops for no reason whatsoever. So that led to the problem in Kenosha. Once the rioting started, the police in Kenosha stood down. The governor of Wisconsin did not do anything. Kyle Rittenhouse lives 15 minutes from Kenosha. His dad lives in Kenosha. He has connections to Kenosha. He went there to help because the adults weren't helping. So I have sympathy as to why he was in this situation in the first place. So before we even get into all the ins and outs and all the details about the Rosenbaum shooting, and then the Huber shooting, and then the Gage Grossgard shooting, the fact that he was there trying to do the right thing, I think, should be made abundantly clear, because he did not go there to start mowing down, Black Lives Matter supporters by any means whatsoever. He went there to help. He went there to help put out fires and to give medical assistance to people, because for some reason, the police in Kenosha and the governor of Wisconsin took a hands-off approach.
Yeah,
they're responsible for this.
Right, exactly. And that was in my notes. Thanks. So I can actually reduce my rant to only about 4 minutes instead of 7. But Andy, if you want to queue up this, I'll set up this video. But it's like, this is one of the two prosecutors. Some people call him Fatlock. I think that's a fantastic nickname for this despicable attorney. And so, yeah, he said this was his closing argument. This was part of his closing argument to the jury.
I prefer Tuballard.
Andy, gonna play it?
Let's do it.
Everybody takes a beating sometimes, right? Sometimes you get in a scuffle and maybe you do get hurt a little bit. That doesn't mean you get to start plugging people with your full metal jacket AR-15 rounds, and no, bullets are not bullets. And we heard testimony about that. Everybody takes a beating sometimes, right?
Right. So that's everybody. So it was incumbent upon Kyle Rittenhouse, a 17-year-old kid, to drop his gun and get his ass kicked by a mob of raging lunatics, and most of them were convicted felons. And the one who was chasing him, Rosenbaum, was a convicted multiple child molester. Of course, he didn't know that at the time. But the prosecution's closing argument is literally, Kyle Rittenhouse should have got his ass kicked. You're supposed to sit there because everybody takes a beating sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
When we were talking about this in your office yesterday, I think.
Yeah, I got a little hot.
you brought up you started quoting this like everyone takes a beating sometimes, and I was like, oh, ha, 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 ha. And then you like said it again, and I was like, wait, did the prosecution actually say that? And you're like, no, they did. I thought you were just like, exaggerating something.
No.
And
No.
that's the first time I actually saw that video. That is some shocking stuff, because it's not like it's just some like domestic dispute in your front yard where your brother pushed you, so you shot him in the face or something like that. Like there was a mob. He was being chased by a mob. I think a beating can turn into him being beaten to death pretty darn quickly. So yeah, that was ridiculous to see them say that. Ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the second clip, and so this is where the Fatlock calls Kyle Rittenhouse.
I love that. That's great.
Yeah, Ace of Spades had that one, and I've seen it on Twitter as well. Fatlock. I'm going to keep that. That's good. I stole it, everyone. That's fine. But here's him. Another, again, part of his closing argument to the jury to convict Kyle Rittenhouse of not using self-defense but murder instead. This is what he was supposed to have done.
And that he had to exhaust all methods. Clearly, if there is provocation, he's guilty. But even outside of provocation, why do you get to immediately just start shooting? As Mr. Binger said, he brought a gun to a fist fight.
That's right.
And he was too cowardly to use his own fist to fight his way out.
Oh my God.
He has to start shooting. And let's just say, theoretically, that we think that the 12 of you think that it is reasonable to have used force, deadly force in that situation. Shoots once, takes out his hip. And then he had to exhaust
shut up.
all methods.
Shut up, Fatlock. Get lost. Okay, I don't want that guy.
These are like the same people that are like, you should just like hide under your bed when someone breaks into your house. Like that.
Yeah, well, so over my shoulder here, this is the Ricada Law feed, and if they go to full screen with just the camera on the courtroom, then maybe something interesting is going to happen. So they're still out, but the idea that one of the attorneys there mentioned, boy, I hope there isn't any victims of domestic abuse on that jury, because by pulling this logic out, a woman who is being beaten by her husband has no, and she happens to have a gun. I mean, this is where this goes. It's like, no, use your fist, you coward. Fight your way out of this. I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse was being surrounded by a mob. He found himself in that situation by accident. He got separated from his group of people. Kyle Rittenhouse was not the only person with an AR-15, let alone a firearm, in Kenosha that night. There were scores of them, if not more than 100 people armed to try to protect the city. And again, as Chris pointed out, this was only necessary. Kyle Rittenhouse and others were only there because the police and the governor refused to protect this community. They let riots run for 1 or 2 nights straight. And, business owners had no other recourse. And so they asked some people, and, Americans decided to no, we're going to push back against this leftist BLM Antifa chaos and stop our city from being burned to the ground. Because again, the police and the governor did not do anything. Here's a little fun fact. Donald Trump offered the National Guard to help protect Kenosha. And what did the governor of Wisconsin, who was a Democrat, do? He declined it. Why? Because burning cities all summer in 2020 served the purposes of getting Joe Biden elected, Donald Trump out of the White House, and serve the interests of the Democrat Party. Period. That's why it happened. And you know why? You know what proof of that is? Because now Governor Evers is putting out the National Guard. They're out there right now at this moment in Kenosha to protect against rioting in case Kyle Rittenhouse is rightly found completely innocent of these charges. And so this is all part of, look, the burning of our cities in the summer was not some kind of accident. These people are bust there. These protests that turned into riots were funded by leftist outfits, a lot of them funded by George Soros. These are the prosecutors in all of these cities who don't bring any charges against people who have burned these cities down. But again, as we said at the top of the opening here, QAnon shaman is spending 4 years in jail for doing nothing violent at all on Capitol Hill. This is why our legal system in this country is completely broken. When you can see something like this, and now today, the indication is we're on day 3 of deliberations in what is the most obvious case of self-defense that is possible to present. and the jury still can't come back with the proper verdict, which would be not guilty. And it is logical to assume that the reason they are having so much trouble is because they are afraid of what will happen to them personally as jurors if they are to bring back a verdict that the radical, violent left does not like, because they're already out on the streets in Kenosha. They've already threatened. A lot of these jurors they know their lives are at risk if they do the right thing and exonerate Kyle Rittenhouse. This is not a justice system that has any business. This is not the justice system that we thought we have in this country. This is now mob rule. When the mob can keep a proper conviction from happening in a high profile case like this, we don't have rule of law in this country. We have rule of the mob, and our systems in this country made it happen.
I just saw on Twitter, again, I'm refreshing this stuff. Washington Free Beacon, this is a tweet from 35 minutes ago. The Rittenhouse judge said an MSNBC producer was caught following the jury bus, and MSNBC is now banned from the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
Quoting the judge, no one from MSNBC News will be permitted in this building. This is an extremely serious matter and will be referred to the proper authorities. Holy cow, man. This is crazy. Well, Chris, you watch the corporate news so that I don't have to. What are the talking heads on the CNNs and the MSNBCs and even the Fox Newses saying about all of this?
Well, MSNBC from the get-go, especially Joy Reid, has claimed that Kyle Rittenhouse is a white supremacist. He's a militia member. He went there to just mow down protesters for no reason whatsoever. So MSNBC, came in and they told their audience a falsehood about the events preceding the shootings. And unfortunately, a lot of their viewers have not done their homework and actually seen or read about what actually happened. So I think a lot of the CNN and MSNBC viewers have a very skewed account of what happened. And just to show how bad it is, MSNBC, during the closing arguments, they showed the prosecution's closing argument and they did not show the defense's closing argument. So it's so obvious that they are trying to root for the prosecution and they're trying to root against Kyle Rittenhouse. But I think Jim, made a bunch of great points. And I think that what this is about sending a chilling effect to people who are willing to stand up for private property rights and who are willing to stand up for the mob. And the message I think that the prosecution is sending in Kenosha is supposed to be a chilling message for other Americans, where they're saying, hey, if your city's in jeopardy, or hey, if rioters are coming and burning down businesses and smashing car lots, don't do anything about it. Don't even try to defend yourself. Don't even try to defend your business, because if you do, we'll charge you.
Yeah, and we've already kind of gotten into this with the whole media, the picture that the media painted and all of this, but what journalistic malpractice has plagued this whole case from the get-go?
They're not journalists.
I mean, they're narrative spinners. And they immediately started running with this story that he was some type of white supremacist who was illegally armed with a rifle, illegally took it across state lines because he wanted to go kill some protesters, right? And of course, a couple of these things are just slanderous or trying to apply some motive to them. But the gun charges were already thrown out. We know that. The gun charge was thrown out. We also know that it wasn't carried across state lines or anything like that. There was no illegal action there. But for so many people that are tuning into all of this, the narrative has already been cemented. He has been judged guilty by so many in the court of public opinion already. So it's even if after hearing all the evidence, these jurors and a court, a jury of his peers in the court or whatever deems him innocent, we're going to see riots because it's going to be perceived as this giant injustice and that it's some systemically racist system that's allowing this white supremacist to walk free. That's going to be the narrative after this, assuming he gets innocent.
Well, here's my fear. Jim hit upon this, and I'll take it one step further. I think the jurors are probably worried about what might happen to them if they do the right thing and find him not guilty. But I'm also worried.
That's the rumor.
But I'm also worried that they might take a utilitarian point of view on this and say, if we put this guy in jail on a lesser charge, that will, hopefully make the mob, happy enough where they won't destroy our city again. So if they were to say, let's think, is one person going to jail for a couple of decades? He kind of, maybe did something wrong, but by doing that, we will prevent our city from being torched. I fear that they're going to take the former instead of the latter.
Yeah, it's just crazy stuff, and I would not have expected the verdict to take this long. Yesterday was kind of mired in some new revelations about some drone footage, and they had to clear out the courtroom so that the jury had a place where they could watch this new footage and all of this. And after that started, it was like, well, we're not getting a verdict today. So this is day 3 of them deliberating, Jim. You think we're going to get a verdict today? No, you already said it's going to be right after this podcast.
No, yeah. So maybe, yeah. We should probably end the podcast now just so we'll get the verdict. It'll happen right away. Look, I think let me talk about a couple things here. First, as Chris has alluded to, the media is culpable here in what's happened around this country over the last year with all of these riots and things. And right here on the screen, Andy has, for those watching, this is what happens if you're not able to defend yourself in front of a mob of people. This
graphic
is a man.
Warning here.
Yeah, graphic warning. A guy is so he's almost beaten to death by a mob of people. And Kyle Rittenhouse was in the middle of a mob just like that, and he was able to defend himself with a firearm, or else that could have happened to him, and he likely would have been dead. Look, he only shot. Again, if Kyle Rittenhouse is guilty, then nobody is able to use a firearm to protect themselves or their homes ever again, because that would be the precedent now. And I think that's what the left wants. An armed citizenry that wants to resist the leftist mobs that they put out there to influence and control society is a problem. Kyle Rittenhouse is a problem for that kind of a strategy, for allowing these things to happen. These people are not randomly put out on the street, or they just show up. A lot of these people are in organizations in which this is the purpose of their life, is to go and burn down cities, to go and now they have this umbrella of BLM and Antifa that, again, the media has celebrated like some kind of wonderful anti-fascist organization. These are the fascist shock troops of the left on the streets. And Kyle Rittenhouse, again, didn't shoot anybody that wasn't attacking him. So unlike what the Young Turks and maybe MSNBC viewers think, he was not chasing people. People were chasing him. Rosenbaum got shot first because he was grabbing Kyle's gun. He tried to turn around and show him the gun so that Rosenbaum would be smart and stop chasing him, but he kept chasing him and went faster. So Kyle turned around and shot him as he was reaching for his gun.
Grabbing the gun. And as he was running away, trying to run to the police to get to safety, which was several blocks away. Thanks, cops. Don't be down there where the action's happening, where people's lives are in danger. Be safely over there with your lights on. I almost swore. What a complete waste of time, and it costs people's lives in that regard. And then, again, Kyle Rittenhouse was running down the street with people yelling, "Cranium the kid, get him, get him." And, he's running. He gets hit on the back of the head. It's easy to find these videos. He first gets hit on the back of the head with somebody holding a rock. So he gets hit right in the back of the head with a rock, and he continues to run. But then the rock starts to make him dizzy, and he falls. And then when he falls, he's hit over the head by Anthony Huber, hits him over the head with a long skateboard. And then another guy, Jump Kick Man, who, by the way, the prosecution knows who he is and will not bring him in because that would be bad, because this guy was actually attacking Kyle Rittenhouse, kicks him in the head. And then the Anthony Huber comes back again with the skateboard to hit him over the head again, and then try to grab his gun after he hits him. And then Kyle Rittenhouse, because the guy's grabbing his gun, pulls the trigger and it hits the guy in the chest. And unfortunately, he's dead, but it's his own fault. He should have just let Kyle Rittenhouse run to the cops like he wanted to do. Wait. So the prosecution says that
Jump Kick Man.
Kyle Rittenhouse brought a gun to a fist fight.
Right.
Kyle clearly had a gun. So would this other guy have brought a skateboard to a gunfight?
Yeah, right.
I don't understand if these things go back and forth.
Yeah. What is this, like a video game where you get to switch your weapons, like with a press of a couple buttons? So, I got hit in the head with a rock. Let me switch my gun to a rock. Now I'll go and chase that guy with a rock. Oh, a skateboard. Oh, I'll grab my skateboard. I'll try that way. This is ridiculous. The guy was not in a fist fight. The guy was in a fight for his life with people who had weapons. In fact, the last guy he shot, who had his arm vaporized, as he said, I like that term, vaporized by being shot by Kyle Rittenhouse's AR-15 rifle, was pointing a gun in Kyle's face from 3 feet away. If you can't shoot a guy pointing a gun 3 feet away from your face, again, there is no such thing as self-defense ever in this country. So Kyle Rittenhouse wasn't just supposed to let his ass get beat over in that parking lot by the mob that was surrounding him. He was supposed to lie there on the street and get killed by people that were going to bash his head in with anything they could find with them, including a big, heavy skateboard and a Glock pistol in his face. There is no question this kid is innocent. He's 17 years old. Again, he's a 17-year-old kid. He's supposed to fight his way out with his fists against adults? Are you insane? The prosecution did this, and it's because they're corrupt. No charges should ever have been filed. And again, I'll stop yelling here in a minute, but you mentioned, Donnie, like there was a gun charge that he had on him, right? That it was illegal for him to have the gun at all, or that he brought it over state lines. It was obvious to the prosecution from the drop that was not a legitimate charge, that he was a 17-year-old kid who was allowed to hold a long rifle, but that charge stayed on there for the jury to think about. So it was prejudicing the jury against him that he shouldn't have had a gun at all, when the law says that he could have one. And it took the judge, when the entire trial and all the finding of fact was all done, and they're about to instruct the jury on give them the jury instructions so they can deliberate, they brought up the charge for the gun. The judge dismissed it in 30 seconds. And the prosecution knew they would dismiss it in 30 seconds. They didn't even defend the charge anymore. They only kept it in there to maybe get a plea deal and get Kyle in jail, or to prejudice the jury against their client. That is unethical actions by the prosecution. And again, the prosecution is supposed to seek justice, and they're supposed to represent the people of Wisconsin. The people of Wisconsin have been, that this is what the people of Wisconsin have for themselves right now. A prosecution that is persecuting a 17-year-old kid who did nothing wrong in defending himself against deadly force that was used against him.
Yeah, and the one thing that you mentioned, and I think this is probably one of the more important things, is that after the first shooting happens, you see him, all the videos shows Kyle running towards the police.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you want this guy to be brought to justice, it's like he's going to the police.
He didn't shoot a single person that was not attacking him. There was another guy, like, he's on the ground trying to get up, and then he sees a guy across the street who's looking at him, and he's waiting for the guy to do something, and the guy backs off, and Kyle just says, okay, and he walks off.
It's great.
So this entire
control.
I heard on the radio, actually, on a podcast on the way in, on the radio, but on a podcast, I was driving into work this morning. A guy said that he has a friend who's in the 20-year military veteran. He says, I got guys that I went to war with that don't have that kind of trigger discipline. That was unbelievable for a 17-year-old kid. And it really was.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Hey, Donnie, just put a cherry on top of what Jim just said. So MSNBC, Joy Reid, one of my all-time favorites, she literally called the 3 victims in this case heroes.
Oh, right.
And let's just remember, like Jim said, the first one he wasn't a child molester. He was actually a child rapist.
Right. The
second one was convicted for strangling his brother and threatening to kill his grandmother. And Gage Grosskreutz, the guy that actually brandished the pistol in his face. Yeah, that guy's also been accused of beating his girlfriend. So yeah, three heroes here. Yeah.
Yeah, the first one. Oh my gosh, we could do a whole podcast on that first guy.
And I
won't even get into it.
I just don't know how society survives when we have such lying in our media, when we have half of the country believing absolute untruths because that's what they're told, because they trust the liars and the devious people that actually present news on networks like CNN and MSNBC.
They craft reality, man. Even if he is found acquitted of all charges, walks free, all of this stuff, even with all of the video evidence that's out there, and you could see all of the things that are, you could watch the entire trial, you could see everything, you will still have half of the country that'll say that this is evidence of some systemic racist, broken justice system and all of that stuff.
Oh, we forgot to mention Joe Biden called him a white supremacist during the campaign.
Right.
Yeah, without any, like 2 days after the incident, he called Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist. So I think the best scenario for all of this, because this kid's already been traumatized beyond belief. That's why he broke down on the stand. He had post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was on display for everyone who was watching to see. But I hope the best outcome here is that he's exonerated of all charges, and then he gets to be like the Covington kids and sue all of these media outlets for smearing him, and then he ends up being rich for that. That would be amazing. Great.
So, I mean, just based on what you guys are saying, I know I mean, I know what you think should be the result of this trial, but what do you actually think will happen? If means that you have to be very cynical, feel free, maybe pessimistic. I don't know, but just what is in your heart? What is your heart telling you is actually going to result from this trial? Chris, I'll go with you first.
Gosh, I think that the jury is going to find him guilty of something, maybe like reckless homicide. But I think that the judge is going to declare a mistrial because there are 2 pending declarations for a mistrial. And I think the judge understands what's going on here. I think the judge understands that the prosecution is way out of bounds here. And I think he will declare a mistrial. I hope it's without prejudice with prejudice, because then they would not be allowed to retry him. I hope.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk. I mean, Jim, you mentioned the idea of there being a mistrial with prejudice, the prosecutorial overreach and all the different things. And the judge, I'm sure most of the people listening to this have seen this, but the judge like calling out the prosecutor and all of this for the things that he's said. And it seems like even just with those couple of things that happened, it's like he could have called the trial dead right then and there. But nope, they're going to continue going on with it because he wants an actual verdict to be declared here. Jim, what do you think is going to actually result at 1:01 p.m. here as soon as we're done with the podcast?
Yeah, well, I mean, the guys over here at Rakita Law, who I've been watching, and so have hundreds of thousands of people over the last week or so, as this trial goes on, have been pointing out over and over again, kind of yelling into their microphones like we are doing right now, about how the judge needs to dismiss this case with prejudice, which means that Kyle Rittenhouse will go free and not be brought up on any charges related to this incident ever again, because of the egregious prosecutorial abuse going on here. Now, again, all of these, the guys and gals on that channel are defense attorneys, so you expect them to be biased against the prosecution. But even them, and these guys have probably a cumulative 150 years of law experience among them, say they've never seen prosecutorial misconduct at this level ever in their lives, and it just continues to go on and on. They withheld evidence from the defense. They tried to introduce evidence at the last minute, after the jury had already started deliberating, and so they've been arguing about that. I mean, this is getting into the weeds, but they've been arguing about that for the last couple of days. And every time the judge seems to be on the brink of doing the right thing, he pulls back. And so, we're going to date ourselves here by trying to predict what the what the outcome will be. We're going to date this podcast pretty quickly, I believe. But, I'm old enough to remember when I thought OJ was definitely going to be guilty, because the evidence against him was pretty damn solid as well, because he did murder 2 people. And then he walked free. So it's hard to predict what a jury will do, especially
the
jury
football player.
Yeah, the football player.
Get out of here.
The glove didn't fit. The glove didn't fit.
Yeah,
he must have quit.
You know how
Just
long?
kidding.
You know how long
Just
it took?
kidding.
You know how long it took for the jury to come with a decision for that case?
3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. No,
But that was in response to the
that.
Rodney King beatings. So that was a tit for tat. And here's my fear: this is going to be another tit for tat.
Well, that was a jury nullification in which they didn't care what the evidence was. They were going to let OJ go free for some kind of retributive justice for Rodney King in Los Angeles, whatever. So, that's not the case. So when OJ was for 3 hours and I heard that, I was like, oh my God, it's one of those things where you remember where you were. I was a reporter at that time in Pennsylvania, and we were all huddled around the television waiting for the verdict. And I thought, God, 3 hours, they must think like me. Obviously he's guilty. It would only take about 3 hours to determine that, and just, call it a day and get to go home after being sequestered for months on end in that circus of a trial. But of course, the opposite happened and people were shocked. But I think in this case, the most likely outcome is probably a hung jury. I believe there are people on that jury who know that he is innocent and will not budge, no matter how much other people on the jury want to convict him of something. Because if you think convicting Kyle Rittenhouse of some kind of minor charge and letting him maybe serve another 6 months in jail, or if the judge has any sense of justice at all, let him go with time served. If you think Kyle Rittenhouse going away to prison for life on all charges, anything short of that will assuage a mob, you're nuts. You cannot negotiate with a mob. You cannot just say, hey, look here, we gave you not a whole pound of flesh, about 9 ounces of flesh. Will you stop rioting now? That's not how it works with mobs. That's not how it works. So I think they're actually going to be a hung jury. And the best case scenario in that case is for the judge to, after that hung jury, then dismiss this case with prejudice and then let him go. But, the judges also and his family have been threatened with death and bodily harm in this as well. That we allow this to go on in this country is just really disheartening. that you can't, a kid like Kyle Rittenhouse will have to be sacrificed in order to supposedly appease a mob. We can't have that in this country. We just simply can't. And if this happens this way again, your right of self-defense is now forfeit as well. So just one last point. I know we're going to get into COVID here, which is another great topic that YouTube definitely won't censor us for. But the prosecution made this case that, because Kyle Rittenhouse, and again, scores and scores of other armed people came to Wisconsin to protect property that night. They kept making the point that you're not allowed to use deadly force to protect property. Okay, so what does that mean if you're at home and you have a firearm to protect your home, say a shotgun or a pistol, or, oh my gosh, even an AR-15 assault style rifle? What if you have something like that in your home and a mob comes to your house and they start tearing up your yard, and then they start breaking in your windows, and then they bust down your door, and then they run inside? Are you not allowed to protect your property with deadly force in a situation like that? Because basically Kyle Rittenhouse was protecting his person from a mob with deadly force with a rifle. So you're supposed to just let you open your door, just let them all run in, take all your stuff, maybe assault your wife and your children.
I think we have the answer to that.
Because that's your property, and you should be able to protect it with as much force as necessary to stop the threat. That's what Kyle Rittenhouse did.
Look what happened to the McCloskeys in St. Louis when a big mob basically entered their private neighborhood and was threatening to kill them. They were prosecuted just for sporting a rifle and a pistol,
brandishing them. Yes.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, so there's a lot riding on this case that has nothing to do with necessarily Kyle Rittenhouse's freedom or incarceration. The rights of all of us to protect ourselves from raging mobs is on the line.
Second Amendment's on trial.
We will see what happens in precisely 19 minutes, but let's use the rest of this time to talk about COVID. So shifting topics here. We have not talked about COVID-19 directly for a while. Which is surprising, because there was a complaint of mine for a period of time where it seemed like every week we were talking about COVID. So I went back and looked. We haven't talked about COVID since episode 311, September 10th, where we actually were talking about the COVID lab leak origins. So it's been 2.5 months. So surely there are some developments that we need to discuss. Even though we decided that we were going to talk about this Tuesday of this week. Actually, I think we decided we were going to talk about COVID updates for last week, and then we ended up talking about some other stuff instead. But the big update, in my opinion, came last night. So Glenn Beck live streamed a special last night on COVID-19 called Crimes or Cover-Up, Exposing the World's Most Dangerous Lie. The video is currently available on YouTube. I'll put it in the show notes too, but you should watch this video. It is incredibly comprehensive. It's backed up by a ton of official documents, deep research, FOIA requests from Fauci and some of the NIH people. Glenn shows how there is a lot of evidence that suggests the COVID-19 virus was not a naturally occurring virus, that it was artificially engineered using gain-of-function research in the United States, funded by Fauci and the NIH. Then the Frankenstein virus was brought to the Wuhan lab for further development. So then he shows how all these documents that appears that the Wuhan lab was scrambling to deal with a leak just prior to the outbreak that happened, right? So they requested new ventilation systems, air incinerators. There's reports of lab technicians getting sick. Then he starts going through all these FOIA documents, Freedom of Information Act documents of the emails between Fauci and some others that were suggesting that they were basically in a panic after some of this news was coming out of China, even so far as trying to craft a narrative to make it seem like, no, this was just some naturally occurring thing. Make sure you put out the message that this is just some naturally occurring thing. And it goes into a whole bunch of detail about a number of very important topics. It's, like I said, it's very comprehensive. And I know that some people listening to this are saying oh, yeah, duh, I already knew this. But, maybe you've heard about some of this. I have. And maybe you've suspected some of this. I have. But I don't think that anyone's ever laid out everything as thoroughly and organized as it is in this special. And he's got the documents to back up all of this stuff. That he's presented, and it's available on the website that he flashes on the screen all of the time during the video. So it's incredible. It should be front page news. There should be massive investigations about all of this at the very least. I mean, just based on some of the stuff that he shows, like if you watch this, even if you give it to like a person super far on the left, if they watch this and they're like, okay, yeah, like I don't completely buy the narrative that he's selling. Like at the very least, you should be able to recognize that there is a lot of smoke, and that means that there should be at least some type of investigation into this. And if you watch this and don't even think there's any smoke, then there's no helping you, because there is so much stuff presented in this. It's incredible. I watched the entire 2-hour thing. I don't think that you would regret it if you spent 2 hours watching this as well. Jim, you started watching it last night. Did you end up finishing it, or are you saving that for later?
I didn't finish it. I caught it because Justin Haskins, a frequent member of this podcast or participant in this podcast.
Never heard of him.
Never heard of him. Yeah. He's working on a book with his second book that he's working on with Glenn Beck right now on the Great Reset. And he sent us all, and you were on that text thread, Donnie, saying, hey, the Glenn Beck thing is on right now. Check it out. So I got in there a little late. So I got in there, I think about maybe 40 minutes in, and I watched some of it. And then I stopped and I started to watch it from the beginning again. And then I had to go to sleep. So I am going to watch the whole thing. But what is fascinating, I'll just make 2 points, and I'm interested in Chris's take on this as well. But the fascinating thing is that this, as Justin actually pointed out to us today on a separate chat, instant messaging program today, he said that Glenn Beck had been working on this investigation, him and his team, for a year. And so this is very comprehensive. One of the things that strikes you near the beginning is, and he takes it and he runs it all out. Like, again, this is 2 hours, and they run out in great detail what the real origins of COVID-19 and what America knew about it, what America's public health experts knew about it. But what was striking to me at the very beginning was that Anthony Fauci in his emails was in a panic. He was in a panic right away,
right?
Because he knew that this could all be traced back to the National Institutes of Health and the decisions he made as far as funding dangerous gain of function research with coronaviruses. And if you've watched any of the clips of Rand Paul versus Anthony Fauci, you could probably just put those words in the search on YouTube and find them. Rand Paul has his number.
Yeah, he goes in depth with that and talks about how Fauci is just straight up lying when he says that, no, we have never funded any gain of function research. Lying. Straight up lying.
NIH changed the definition of gain of function research on their website after Fauci's first testimony because Rand Paul implicated him in lying to Congress.
One of the big researchers behind this thing, putting together this Frankenstein of a virus, he actually reached out to DARPA for funding. And DARPA, again, Glenn goes into all of this stuff. DARPA rejected the proposal because they thought it would be too risky to basically Frankenstein this virus like they were proposing to do, so that they can find a vaccine for it, right? So DARPA said that it was too risky to do this, and they went ahead anyways with more NIH funding.
But Donnie, let's take a big step back. So Dr. Fauci has been an advocate of gain of function research for many years. The Obama administration, I will give them credit, they put the kibosh on gain of function research. Dr. Fauci then, with Peter Drozduk of the EcoHealth Alliance, basically outsourced that to the Wuhan lab.
Right.
Okay. This is all facts. This is all guaranteed 100% factual. What are the odds that the Wuhan lab, which is, I think, a level 3 biosafety lab, one of the only in the entire world, which had a history of horrible safety accidents, and State Department communications made sure that this was in fact the case. They want us to believe that the virus came from a wet market, somehow from a bat to a pangolin, when literally 500 feet away is a bio 3 terror safety lab. Come on, give us a break. Common sense. Just complete common sense. It came from the lab. It was probably a leak from the lab. All the evidence points towards that. Like you said, Dr. Fauci, in the middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning, when this first, became a news story, was fervently writing emails with Peter Daszak and all his friends trying to cover it up. They then put out that bogus paper through, the WHO. Peter Daszak was on the WHO's initial investigation into the origins of COVID-19, total conflict of interest. Everything in the, coming out of China is a total lie, obviously. It's just preposterous. It's ridiculous that people are still like unaware that this was a genetically manufactured virus. And the really scary thing is, because it's genetically engineered, it's going to be with us forever, and it's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. And our vaccines are not vaccines in the traditional sense, because they are only preventing serious illness from it. Like when you take the polio vaccine, you're set for life.
You don't get polio. That's what it's for.
Exactly. So these are not even vaccines in the true sense of the word.
Right, and then it also doesn't stop the spread of it, apparently. So that's another big.
Yeah,
Right.
Andy can attest to that.
Right.
Our producer.
Yeah, but it's just and again, like this is a drum that we beat constantly on this, but just like the journalistic malpractice of this, and not only just like the journalistic malpractice, but the stifling of speech from the like social media and all of this, because this was a concept that was thought about. It didn't take very long for people to Google and find out that there was a Wuhan COVID research lab, right where the outbreak started. So this lab leak theory started pretty quickly. But no, you're not allowed to talk about this. This is all labeled a conspiracy theory. Don't look over here, everybody. Don't look over here. You can't even, you might get demonetized if you even suggest this, on your YouTube channel or anything like that. So it's like, how are we ever supposed to get to the truth if we can't have these conversations from day one? And now fast forward 18 months, 20 months later, now we're actually allowed to have this conversation. Oh, thank you. I'm sure no damage has been done since the start of all of this. It's absolutely insane.
But Donnie, you've got to remember that this all happened in an election year. And what happened as soon as this outbreak began? They blamed Donald Trump. They used this as a cudgel to make sure. Exactly. So, more people have died under Joe Biden of COVID-19 than under President Trump. However, the media gives him a total pass on that. The media lied through their teeth because they wanted this as the reason to get Donald Trump out of office. The media is just completely dishonest. They're propagandists.
Again, I mean, us talking about the corruption of the corporate media is apropos. We seem to talk about it every single damn podcast. And I have a certain affinity for this argument because I used to be in the media, and as I say, I'm a recovering journalist. That's just the way I think about it, because it's a sickness, our corporate media these days. It was you would be, as mentioned before, if you said any of these things on social media, your account was either suppressed or canceled. It was considered conspiracy theory mongering to suggest the logical explanation for this was that this must have come from the lab in which they work on these dangerous experiments in the city in which it came out. To say the most logical thing was practically illegal. You were called a conspiracy theorist and a nut job for even saying so, for going against the absurd official line that this was naturally occurring. And again, if you watch this Glenn Beck special, early on in the 2 hours of him going through this, he mentions that they jump on that so-called natural progression of this virus right away. And they need to get that meme out. They need to get that narrative out there immediately. They have to have all of the media together saying that this must have come, our health experts say, this must have come from a natural, mutation from bats to humans, even though there was not a scintilla of evidence, and they still can't find an animal with this virus in it. As I think Glenn Beck points out, you can't give this to a bat. It won't take. It could be that bad as far as this is concerned. But to say, the pursuit of truth requires free speech. It requires speech to not be suppressed. And when you say the most logical things and you're called a conspiracy theorist, and when your media is intentionally lying about things to ensure the outcome of an election because they had Trump derangement syndrome and had it for 4 years, they were willing to do anything it took to get Donald Trump out of the White House. And if it meant giving Democratic politicians, by the way, a pass for saying, come on down to Chinatown, we're having a parade, it's get on a plane, live your life. Bill de Blasio, a freaking communist, said that. All right. And so our media allows that kind of irresponsible stuff to happen. And it gets on Donald Trump for stopping, I don't know, travel from China where this virus happened. You have to remember the context of all of this stuff. And it's now becoming very clear. And thank goodness Glenn Beck took the time over a year of research to put this all together, is that the people who use their brains instead of listening to propaganda were more right than the so-called public health experts, or at least the media, was telling us. And so, without free speech, if you can't even have these conversations, that's extremely dangerous. And you know what? You don't actually live in a free society if that's the case.
Well, and that's another thing. And if our show hasn't been canceled yet, it's going to be canceled now, because it's like, what are we allowed to talk about? Chris and Jim, you mentioned the chilling effect when it came to the trial and all of that, but like, there's a massive chilling effect when it comes to all of the stuff that we could theoretically be talking about. I saw a news article on, I think it was on the top of Drudge or something, talking about how Ireland is reinstituting a whole bunch of like curfews and other restrictions because their COVID cases are surging. And then they also note that Ireland has the highest adult rate of vaccination out of like any other country or something like that.
I think it's 92%.
Yeah, I think it was 93, but whatever, a little margin of error there.
And the surge was 600 cases, I believe. Yeah. Surge.
Yeah, but the thing is, you wouldn't expect that to be the case. So can we question the efficacy of these vaccines without getting canceled? I don't even know anymore.
Of course not.
There was a study that a trusted friend of mine shared on Facebook that made it seem like it was possible that the spike protein that they use in the mRNA vaccine actually prevents the adaptive immunity in your body to actually mutate with the mutations of the virus itself. So like you actually become more susceptible to the different variants of COVID. Are we allowed to talk about that without being canceled? I don't even know anymore.
Are we allowed to talk about natural immunity? No.
Yeah.
But I totally understand. But Donnie, one just quick more thing on the origins. Occam's razor, the most simple solution is the most likely solution. Can we just please put aside all these crazy theories about it, jump from a pangolin to a that, to a this, to a that, and just, use our brains and use some common sense.
Wait, Andy says in our little private chat, our Facebook was shadow banned because we discussed side effects of the vaccine. Is that because of our broadcast right now, or is that like an earlier thing, Andy? Because this could be a previous in the tank. Okay. Yeah, great. Of course. So it's like we don't even know what we're allowed to talk about. Like that is a breeding ground for disinformation. They're doing this to fight disinformation, but this is a breeding ground for disinformation, because when they stop people from talking about these things, they stop people from, they label everything about the lab leak a conspiracy theory as soon as it happens, or anything that goes against just like the corporate media narrative, it gets shut down. That is not a sustainable environment for a free society with free speech and all of that. I don't care. I almost swore to Jim. I don't care if this is private companies that are doing this versus the government doing this. It is still detrimental to our free speech in this country. It's ridiculous.
It is. And it's to suppress our speech. And then, we've railed a lot about the mask mandates that are going on, that they don't seem to make any sense. We look with jealousy at countries like Sweden that never lock down, that have lower COVID infection and death rates than the United States does. You look at states like Florida, where you're allowed to live in freedom, states like Illinois, where I live, where you're not. It's pathetic. It's pathetic that I have to look back at like June and July when they dropped the mask mandate and let us go back to normal life for about 5 weeks. And then now you have to wear a mask everywhere you go, inside any public place in Illinois. And then you come to the realization they're never going to take that boot off your neck. They're never going to do it unless we all just, we all have to resist this. We all have to let common sense and freedom rule, not, tyranny and arbitrary rules that never, ever, ever end. They keep talking about the Delta variant now, and, we don't hear so much about variants anymore. It's still the Delta variant, but, it's just going to be something else that comes along. This has been the most depressing global psychological experiment in history.
Yeah.
And and it's been so disappointing to see so many people just roll over, lie down, and have their not actually live a life, but be ruled by others. And then to have this has actually been very clarifying. Our corporations, our free market is in this cabal with government to control your life. That's why social media companies won't let you talk about anything involving COVID unless it's the official government line. That's why you have your friends and neighbors who used to think we're normal, freedom-loving Americans, wanting to turn you into the authorities for not wearing a mask, or people allowing schools, letting our children be basically have their faces covered up and not be in school for a year and then not be able to see their friends. I mean, this is sick. This has to end, and it has ended in places like Sweden. But you go to Australia, it's even worse than the United States. And in the country of Austria, they actually have cops roving the streets, checking people's vaccination status and finding them if they can't prove that they've been vaccinated. You don't think that this could happen in the free West, in the Western world, but it's happening right now. And if we don't put a stop to it by standing up to it, it will come to this country as well. There's no reason why it wouldn't, because nobody is pushing back enough on all of these overreaches against our freedom.
Yeah, as so often happens on this podcast, I have a whole bunch of notes here and articles and links that we did not have time to get into, but they will still be in the show notes. So I have a couple of things talking about the courts striking down Joe Biden's vaccine mandate and OSHA saying that they were going to kind of not go along with it and all of this type of stuff. And I got a couple of articles talking about how basically learn to live with masks for the rest of your life. Maybe that'll be a topic that we talk about in another episode, but we are out of time, so we're going to call it a day on this episode of the In the Tank podcast. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. If you're listening to the audio only, you're probably listening to it on a Friday. If you'd like to get it a day earlier, join us live on Facebook and YouTube, if we're still there after this episode, I don't know, where you can join us live noon Central Time on those two channels if you want to put a face to the voice and join into the conversation. If you'd like, you can follow us on Twitter at InTheTankPod. If you have any comments, suggestions, questions for the show, feel free to email us at inthetankpodcast@gmail.com. Jim, where can the fine people find you?
At Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Heartland Inst on Twitter, and always go to heartland.org.
Chris, you are a ghost on social media, so just join me in saying goodbye to the fine people.
Bye, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.
That's right. Everyone, thank you for tuning in. We will talk to you next week.